Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If there is any problem, tell me because I'm not very tech savvy. Anyway, but I have found yesterday's session with the fourth sem students quite smooth and easygoing. There was no problem. And today, as you know, that this is an online class because we have a nationwide lockdown and therefore we cannot meet you in the university classroom. And this is really an exceptional situation, something which we have not experienced in our lifetime. And definitely you are pretty junior. You have not also experienced such a situation in your lifetime. Anyway, it's very reassuring to see all your faces after a long gap. And earlier, we used to meet in the classroom every day. It was a ritual, and we took it for granted that we will meet the students in the classroom. But due to this, radical change in situation, look how we have found this interaction time quite precious. You see your teacher online because you can't meet him or her, and I also miss you because I can't meet all of you, in the classroom. Anyway, we have to make up for the progress we had made earlier. And as far as I can recollect, I had already begun discussing T.S. Eliot's first poem prescribed in your syllabus, Preludes. And I think I had already made some progress in the classroom. Am I correct? Did I read some lines of the poem with you? Can you
sir.
remember? Yes. Will you help me? How far
Yes,
did
sir.
yes, how far did I proceed? Can you help me? No, how far did I proceed? Any idea?
Sir, you did not start the poem.
Oh, I didn't start the discussion of the poem. Is it so?
No.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay, maybe, yeah. So it was probably
Hmm.
with the evening students, yes, because I have a similar assignment in the evening second semester course. Okay, so in your case, I think that I had given you an introduction.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Introduction to Eliot's early poetry. Yes, I mentioned that Eliot's preludes were composed in different places. I hope you remember. And Eliot's preludes was probably one of his earliest poems. He started composing this poem. In fact, the first prelude and the second prelude were composed in Harvard way back in 1910. When Eliot was barely 22 years old, not even 22, he was 21. So it was in October 1910 that Eliot composed the first two preludes, and the third prelude was composed in July 1911 when Eliot moved to Paris. Eliot moved to Paris in July 1911, and he wanted to live in the literary environment of Paris. He was a student of Harvard University at that point of time. He had been pursuing his doctoral thesis at that point of time. And at the same time, he had also developed his passion for poetry. And as you know, that Paris was the literary capital at that time of the world, in the early 20th century, especially. So Eliot wanted to live and imbibe the literary spirit of Paris in the first half of the 20th century. So Eliot was there in July 1911, and later he returned to America once again, and probably in November 1911 or early 1912, he finished the composition of his fourth and final prelude. Okay, so this is the history of the composition of the four preludes, which you have as the first poem in your syllabus. And you would also know that the original title of the four preludes was Preludes in Roxbury, Roxbury, Roxbury. Later, Eliot decided to delete the word Roxbury. He decided to delete any specific place name, and instead of that, he retained only preludes. Why? Because he wanted to give a universal character to his poem, which could be set in any urban industrial setting. And if you look at the title preludes once again, it means that preludes are short musical compositions on one particular theme. We find preludes in the domain of music. And Eliot also was familiar with the preludes of the famous French musician, Chopin, Chopin. Okay, preludes of Chopin. Okay, he was familiar with that. But in any traditional musical composition, preludes are always indicative of a harmonious experience, musical experience. But if you look at the theme of this poem, Preludes, you will find that there is a music of ideas. Apart from that, okay, there is no musicality in the composition of this poem, Preludes. Rather, it is an anti-romantic composition on the urban squalor, dinginess, dirtiness, and moral and spiritual degeneration. Eliot composed this poem against the backdrop of his own city, Boston. Okay, he was born there. And as I've already mentioned, that these preludes were generally the recorded memories of the poet of his early boyhood and early adulthood days. We find how preludes are also, in a way, recreation of Eliot's adulthood memories. And when he was a young man living in the city of Boston, he used to come across the industrial environment of the place, and he watched closely the urban pedestrian life in an industrial city like Boston. And what happened that Eliot was particularly disturbed by the urban squalor, which also influenced the moral and spiritual makeup of the people of Boston. Later, when he moved to Paris, he came under the influence of famous French symbolist poets, most important of them being Charles Baudelaire. Eliot was profoundly influenced by Baudelaire, and in Baudelaire's depiction of Paris life, Eliot also found a similar kind of depiction of ugliness, squalor, and lack of spirituality. So, if we look at the compositions, the four preludes clubbed under one poem, preludes, we find there is a unity of ideas, there is a unity of impression, but that unity of ideas does not create any romantic musical association. Rather, it is a sad commentary upon the miserable plight of the urban people, miserable plight of the people who are affected by the moral and spiritual degeneration of a particular milieu. So I would like to refer to the text now. I would like to read, the lines of the text, and I would also suggest that you should follow the text. And the fast prelude, we look at it. The fast prelude, as you know, was modeled on Baudelaire's famous French poem Crépuscule du Soir, Crepuscule, Crepuscule, du, Soir, Soir. The English translation is the evening twilight, because the poet records the nature scape of city life after the sunset. It's like an evening sonata, but obviously not with its musical associations. Let us read the lines. The winter evening settles down with smell of sticks in passageways. The winter evening settles down. So it's a description of the approaching evening during winter in the urban industrial city. Settles down. And what is the immediate experience of this evening? Smell of sticks in passageways. Now, in Eliot's early poetry, you will find that smell is generally associated with something which is offensive, unacceptable, okay, and degenerative. Smell is something which is associated with pollution, corruption, okay, something putrid. So smell of sticks. Sticks, once again, sticks refer to meat, okay, that is not fresh. Probably, rancid meat, probably, stale meat in passageways. Now, which passageways? These are the little bylanes of the urban cityscape where the industrial laborers, the workers frequently visit at the end of their day's work. So they cannot afford to visit the expensive restaurants. Rather, they visit the cheap roadside food stalls where very cheap meat is sold, maybe at a very low price. But that smell of sticks, once again, gives us an impression of something which is obnoxious, something which is nauseating, something which is disagreeable to smell. Disagreeable to smell. Smell of sticks in passageways. And then 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, okay, marks the end of the day's work in an industrial town. 6 o'clock. The burnt out ends of smoky days. So the next line, this the burnt out ends of smoky days, is a brilliant metaphor. Is a brilliant metaphor. Burnt out ends of smoky days. Days are compared to what? Days are compared to cigarettes. Days are compared to cigarettes, and the end of a day is like the burnt out end of a cigarette. Okay, the butt of a cigarette, BUTT, the burnt out end of a cigarette. And smoky days. So why smoky? Because the day ends up in smoke as a cigarette ends up in smoke. So what is the point of comparison? The point of comparison is their smokiness. Smokiness means meaninglessness, pointlessness, irrelevance, that another day was spent in a meaningless manner, just as we spend a cigarette, we smoke a cigarette in a meaningless way as a form of addiction, and which is ultimately injurious to health, injurious to our physique. So as a cigarette is injurious to our health, so also a day which is spent in a meaningless manner is also injurious to our mind and soul. So therein lies the comparison between a cigarette and a day spent meaninglessly, the burnt out ends of smoky days. And now a gusty shower wraps, a gusty shower. Look, a gusty means that in winter, especially in the region of Boston, okay, there is a very strong blowing of wind, okay, very strong wind that blows in the evening. So gusty here refers to the violent gusts of wind, and a gusty shower wraps. Shower, you know, shower is a drizzle, and a gusty shower means it is a light drizzle which is accompanied by violent wind. So now a gusty shower wraps, that means it is already a overcast sky, and the winter evening experiences a rough weather. Okay, the evening starts with a light drizzle accompanied by heavy blowing of wind. It's a winter evening, and now a gusty shower wraps the grimy scraps of withered leaves. The grimy scraps. Look here, grimy, you know, soiled, polluted, dirty, grimy. Grimy scraps, you know, bits and pieces of withered leaves. It is already winter, and you know, in winter leaves are withered. So in winter the withered leaves are now being wet in the light drizzle, and they mix with the soil and get even dirtier. So these dirty withered leaves, they simply stick to the feet of the observer, of about your feet. Very interesting, the use of the possessive pronoun, your feet. Who is this your? Look, your feet again here, your may refer to the observer, the poetic voice, or who we may call the poetic consciousness. Your feet, and your may also be a classic example of what we call de-doublement, D-E-D-O-U-B-L-E-M-E-N-T, de-doublement. De-doublement is a technique which Eliot had learned from the French symbolist poets like Charles Baudelaire and Rimbaud. So what is de-doublement? De-doublement basically means the duplication of the self-duplication, whereby the perceiving consciousness divides itself into two selves. One is the acting self, the agent, and another one is the observing self, the observer, the agent and the observer. So your feet, withered leaves about your feet, may refer to the agent, the acting self of the poetic consciousness, whereas there is an observer who observes and points out the events to the acting self. So withered leaves about your feet, and once again look how there is a reference to a particular body part. not to the whole person, about your feet. Now, this is an example of synecdoche. Synecdoche, you know, part for the whole. And in Eliot's early poetry, we shall find several synecdochic references in order to negate the possibility of an entire human personality, as if there is no significance of an entire human personality. So a withered leaves about your feet, and newspapers from vacant lots. Newspapers from vacant lots. Vacant lots means, lots here means the parking lots, the car parking lots. And why are they vacant? Why are the car parking lots vacant? Because it's already 6 o'clock, because it's evening, because all the workers of the factory have left their own offices for their respective homes. So we find that the vacant lots, and what we find in the vacant lots, the newspapers. Why? Because in the morning, when they came to join their regular office work, they carried the newspapers with them, and they were in a hurry. So probably they dumped the newspaper on the parking area. And in the evening, when there is light drizzle accompanied by heavy blowing wind, we find that the newspapers, like the withered leaves, are also, you know, darted, and they are also grimy, and they create an impression of corruption, of pollution in the physical environment. Next, see, after semicolon, the showers beat. Semicolon means a pause in terms of time. First, the poet described the early part of the evening, and now probably he is moving to the later part of the evening, that is the night. What happens as the evening advances to night? What happens? The showers beat. Look, earlier the expression was a gusty shower. From a gusty shower, we find showers from singular to plural. What is the difference when we switch over to singular to plural? Singular meant what? Light, intermittent drizzle, that is light rainfall. And what is the meaning of the plural? Showers. Showers means, you know, steady and heavy rainfall. So we find that when the evening matures into the night, there is a greater intensity of rain. We find from a light drizzle, rain gradually gains intensity, and it becomes a heavy shower, a heavy downpour. So the showers beat on broken blinds and chimney pots. Broken blinds, look, probably the poetic consciousness, the poetic voice refers to the houses of the poor people, the not so well-to-do people, okay, whose blinds are broken and whose chimney pots are probably broken. So who cannot protect themselves from the untimely rain in great winter. So on broken blinds and chimney pots, and at the corner of the street, there is another scene. Look here, the poetic voice describes another scene at the corner of the street. A lonely cab horse steams and stamps. A lonely cab horse. So interesting that, you know, in the late 19th and early 20th century, a major mode of transport in the urban and rural areas was the horse-drawn coaches. So in this industrial town, we find that horse-drawn carriages were also available. So a lonely cab horse means a horse that was generally used in the carriages as a medium of transport. So that cab horse is now left in the wild, in the open. No, the driver, the coachman, the horseman has left the horse in the open, and it has to face the wrath of nature. So it gets wet in that severe winter, a lonely cab horse, and it steams. It steams means as it is very cold outside, okay, as it exhales, okay, steam comes out of its nostrils, it steams and stamps. Stamps means it stamps its hooves on the ground as a mark of indignation, as a mark of protest. And we find that the action of the horse, the lonely cab horse, is probably imbued with the emotions of the observer. Who is the observer here? The observer is the poetic voice, the poetic consciousness, okay, which has split itself into two halves. One is the agent and the other one is the observer. So we find that in the first prelude, the poet has drawn several sketches of the urban landscape. We find that Eliot has used a cinematic technique in order to describe the cityscape in a typical wintry evening. You will find that the idea of cinema, it began at the beginning of the 20th century, 1901 onwards. And initially, that the film was silent. There was no audio. And you would find that the cinematic technique was mostly dependent on the idea of what we call a collage, COLLAGE. And this collage in its cinematic form, particularly in France, was known as montage, MONTAGE, montage. So we find here that Eliot is adopting the cinematic technique, because if you look at the first prelude, you will find a number of cinematic shots. Like the first shot, winter evening settles down, smell of sticks in passageways, 6 o'clock. That is the first shot. And look at the next shot, and now a gusty shower wraps the grimy scraps of withered leaves about your feet and newspapers from vacant lots. And look at the third shot, the showers beat on broken blinds and chimney pots and at the corner of the street. Now, corner of the street is the fourth shot, a lonely cab horse steams and stamps. So there are 4 major shots plus one. The last line of the first prelude itself is a separate shot, the 5th and final shot, and then the lighting of the lamps. Lighting of the lamps, where? Where do we find the lighting of the lamps? Probably in certain residential areas. Now, which residential areas are these? Probably they would refer to the red light district, the red light areas, the brothels, because in the third prelude, we shall find a specific reference to brothel, a specific reference to a prostitute in the third prelude. So at the end of the first prelude, we find that there is lighting of the lamps, which is an image that has been used as a deliberate contrast 2. The oppressive darkness of the night, which plagues the lonely cab horse, which disturbs and irritates the lonely cab horse, and which shows a total lack of human sympathy and concern for the non-humans, of the animal world. So, in the first prelude, if you look very carefully, you will find that there is a distinct change of time, and along with the passage of time, there is also a distinct change in the choice of imagery. And you will find that the selection of imagery is also imbued with the emotional state of the speaker. The speaker is emotionally involved with the environment which he describes. So, in the first prelude, we find it very difficult to separate the objects of perception from the perceiving consciousness. Objects of perception and the perceiving consciousness. The human and the non-human are correlated, as if the physical objective setting is imbued with a very deep sense of human emotion. So, human emotion is not expressed personally, directly, subjectively. Rather, it is decoded in the surrounding environment. It is decoded in certain objects, which speak volumes of the internal state of mind, of the perceiving self, of the poetic voice, of the poetic consciousness. So, in this way, I think that you have been able to, understand the meaning of the first prelude to a certain extent. Do you have any question, by the way? I would like to know if you have any question regarding the first prelude. Any question?
Yes, sir. I have a question.
Yes. Tell me.
Hello.
Tell me.
Is that the second line of the poem with smell of sticks in passageways? Sticks. Sticks refers to.
Smell of sticks. The pronunciation is steak.
Stick.
Steak actually refers to a piece of meat or pieces of meat.
Okay.
But here in this context, this meat is not fresh. This meat may be stale. Why? Because this is a poor man's canteen, where they are probably unable to serve fresh meat. And this is a cheap canteen which is frequented by the laborers, the industrial laborers. So Eliot uses the expression, the phrase, smell of sticks in a negative way, in a pejorative way. Here, smell, that is olfactory sensation, is associated with moral degeneration. I have already mentioned that in Eliot's early poetry, olfactory sensation has an association of moral degeneration. Any other question you'd like to ask?
No, sir.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, tell me.
Sir, in the fifth line, and now a gusty shower wraps the grimy scraps of withered leaves about your feet.
Yes.
Yes. Sir, here grimy scraps means?
Grimy scraps, I have already mentioned that grimy means dirty, putrid, sordid, S-O-R-D-I-D, grimy, that is sordid, polluted, dirty, grimy. And scraps, I mentioned scraps means bits and pieces. Scraps, fragments. Scraps means fragments. Fragments of what? Fragments of withered leaves. Withered, that is dried up. Dried up leaves. And when do we find dried up leaves? We find it in winter. In winter. And it is winter, high winter in Boston. Okay? Do you understand?
Yes, sir. Sir, one more question. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Does Howard's beat on broken blinds and chimney pots
Yes.
and at the corner of the street? Sir, please repeat again. On broken blinds, what does it refer?
On broken blinds, I told that it may refer to the residential apartments of the poor industrial workers who cannot afford to repair the blinds. Their blinds, that is window blinds, are broken. Broken means that they cannot afford to repair it. So what may happen? That inside their houses there may be waterlogging in winter because they can't protect their house. Okay, so it shows their vulnerability, that they are vulnerable to bad weather, to bad winter. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yes. Any more question?
Sir, evening twilight.
I have a question.
Evening twilight. Yes. This first prelude was inspired by Baudelaire's famous poem Crépuscule du Soir. I mentioned it earlier. Crépuscule, C-R-E-P-U-S-C-U-L-E. Crépuscule, D-U, small d, small u. Soir, S capital S-O-I-R. Crépuscule du Soir.
স্যার আরেকবার রিপিট করুন না
Crépuscule du Soir, S-O-I-R. I will write it on the WhatsApp group. Okay, the spelling. I will write it on the WhatsApp group. The English
Okay.
translation is evening twilight. Evening twilight. Okay. So let me read a few lines of the second prelude as well. No. Yes. Yes, tell me.
Sir, passageways refers to what?
Passageways
Which
refers
line?
to the lanes and bylanes. The lanes and bylanes of this industrial town where, you know, cheap canteens or cheap restaurants are available. They remain open during the evening for the industrial workers to return from their work and have their dinner. So passageways refers to the lanes and bylanes of this city where we find the cheap restaurants. Now let me,
সেটেল ডাউন মিন্স
yes, huh?
সেটেল ডাউন মিন্স
Settles down.
হ্যাঁ
Winter evening settles down. Yes, winter evening
Yes.
settles down. Settles down means engulfs, you know, pervades. That means evening pervades. The day ends and now the evening engulfs the whole horizon, settles down. There is also a note of, you know, an element of personification here. Okay, as if winter evening is personified. Winter evening settles down. Okay, it has almost a human agency. Human agency.
Sir, a lonely cab horse steams and stamps mean?
Steams, I explained it. Steams means it's very cold outside. It's very cold outside. It's a very cold winter night. So what happens when it is very cold outside? When we exhale, that is when we breathe out, what happens? Along with that exhalation, steam comes out. You will notice it in winter. You know that from our mouth and nose, what happens? Steam comes out. steam comes out. Okay, that is a basic physiological function. So the horse steams means it is very cold outside, and the coachman is so unsympathetic. The coachman is so cruel and selfish that he has left the horse alone in the open, and probably he has secured a safe shelter for him. That is the idea. The idea is that the human beings are callous and indifferent to the non-humans, despite taking their service. You know, human beings are selfish. Do you understand? That is the meaning. That is the idea. Anyway, now the second one. Let me read the second prelude. Yes, second prelude. The morning comes to consciousness. Once again, the morning, the second prelude, is influenced by another famous poem of Baudelaire. The title of that French poem is Crépuscule du Matin. Same spelling, C-R-E-P-U-S-C-U-L-E, Crépuscule, du, D-U, Matin, M-A-T-I-N. The English rendering is morning twilight. The first prelude was evening twilight. The second prelude is morning twilight. Why morning twilight? Because the time of poetic description is in the early morning. In the first prelude, the time of poetic description was the approaching evening. In the second prelude, the time of poetic description is the approaching day. Look at the lines. The morning comes to consciousness of faint, stale smells of beer. So look at the similarities between the two preludes. Look how in the second line of the first prelude and also the second prelude, there is a reference to some food item. In the first prelude, it is about meat, steaks. In the second prelude, it is about a drink, beer. But look at the similarity. What is the similarity, point of similarity? That in both preludes, the food and drink are not fresh. You find that the food and drink are stale. Look at the second prelude of faint, stale smells of beer. Stale, stale, that is not fresh. The beer is stale. The beer is putrid. Faint, stale smells of beer. Again, look how in the first prelude, in the second line, there was reference to smell. In the second prelude, second line, there is a reference to smells. So why singular in the first prelude and why plural in the second prelude? Why? Faint, stale smells of beer? Because in the first prelude, it was only one variety of smell, that is smell of stale meat. But in the second prelude, there are varieties of beer which produce varieties of smell. So it is in the plural, smells of beer. But once again, look how in both preludes, the smell of food and the smell of beer are absolutely disagreeable to the poetic consciousness. The smells are obnoxious. They are nauseating. The smells are nauseating. And the smells of physical, degeneration, physical rotting is also a kind of objective correlative to the moral and spiritual rottenness. Look, this is an important observation. The rottenness of food and drink is indicative of the rottenness of mental and spiritual states. So the idea of rottenness is used in a symbolic sense, that everything is rotten in this industrial city. Here food is rotten, here drinks are rotten, and here human souls are also rotten. So look at this connection, the connection between physical rottenness on the one hand and moral and spiritual rottenness on the other. So a faint stale smells of beer from the sawdust trampled streets with all its muddy feet that press. Look, sawdust trampled street. Why? Why is the street sawdust sprinkled? Why? Why have people sprayed sawdust on the street in the morning? Why? Because in the previous night there had been a very heavy rainfall, a heavy shower. So what happened? That the street had already become muddy and difficult to walk. So in order to make the road walkable in the morning, so that the industrial workers, the factory workers could join their duty in proper time, probably the municipal authorities have sprayed sawdust on the street. And sawdust trampled street, once again, sawdust trampled is an example of participle adjective, compound adjective. No, sawdust trampled street. Now who tramples? The pedestrians, the office goers, the factory workers. What do? They trample. Trample means they walk over. They walk over with their heavy boots, because in winter, in heavy winter, people in the North America, in cities like Boston, use heavy boots, the gum boots. So sawdust trampled streets with all its muddy feet that press. Muddy feet. So actually the feet are not muddied. Okay, the boots are muddied, because the sawdust cannot completely cover or hide the mud beneath it. So it had been a very heavy shower and the roads are very muddy and it is difficult to balance oneself walking on the road. But despite all physical inconveniences, the factory workers must join their office on time. So with all its muddy feet that press to early coffee stands, muddy feet. So once again, look, in the first prelude, I referred to that figure of speech, synecdoche, withered leaves about your feet, part for the whole. And I mentioned that Eliot uses synecdochic figures in his early poetry in order to negate a complete human personality. Similar technique is adopted in the second prelude. With all its muddy feet that press, not the people, but the feet. Once again, an example of synecdoche. Muddy feet that press to early coffee stands. And then a very important expression, very important line, with the other masquerades, with the other masquerades, that time resumes. That time resumes. What is the meaning of the word masquerade? Masquerade. Masquerade refers to a false show. a false, ingenuine parade, masquerade. Okay, so masquerades with the other masquerades. Masquerades means with the other false and pretentious ways of living. In the morning, when people join the worldly activities as if they wear masks, masks of civility, masks of politeness, as if they hide their real ugly self beneath the mask of civility. So with the other masquerades, the word is very important because it gives an expression to the idea of artificial urban life, the artificiality of civic life in an industrial city. So with the other masquerades, that time resumes. What is that time? That time is the beginning of the office time. That time is the beginning of the industry time, the time of activity, the time of office work, okay, the time of all formalities, formal action. So that time resumes. One thinks of all the hands. One thinks. Who is this one? Who is this one? This one is the poetic voice. This one is the poetic consciousness. This one is the observer, the observing self. One thinks of all the hands. Look once again, fragmentation of all the hands. Earlier feet and now hands. As if, you know, human beings as a whole don't matter in this dull and drab and repetitive urban life. Human beings don't matter as a whole. So the hands, one thinks of all the hands that are raising dingy shades. Raising, that is opening. Opening what? Dingy. Dingy means once again sordid, dirty, dirty and sordid. So dingy, dingy shades, shades here, that is the windows. Probably, you know, some specific people are opening their dirty windows, window shades, where in 1,000 furnished rooms. 1,000 furnished rooms. But once again, this expression 1,000 furnished rooms gives a specific inkling into the idea of a red light area. Probably the poetic voice refers to the furnished rooms of a brothel, of a red light district. So there one thinks of all the hands that are raising dingy shades in 1,000 furnished rooms. So somewhere, no, the poetic observer states that there are people who cannot join this flow of humanity. There are people who cannot join this artificial show of public domain. They are private people and they are people of the night. They have nocturnal activities. They are not human beings of the day. They are animals of the night. So look at the contrast. The life begins in an artificial way, as if to cover up the guilt of the immoral activities conducted during the night. So the nighttime traders are probably watching the daytime dissimulators eager to join their trade with their masks on, eager to join the other masquerades of life. Okay, so this is about the second prelude. In the second prelude, once again, I have mentioned that the human beings are compared to the dismembered parts of the body as the fragments of the body, like feet, like hands. And later we would also find references to eyes as well. And we find a monotony and sameness of the same action, the repetitive action being done day in and day out. So fragmentation is a negation of the individual identity. Now, I have already provided extensive lecture notes on the university website. I hope you have received the lecture notes on Eliot's Preludes and Marina. Have you received it?
Yes, sir.
Have you seen it?
Yes, sir.
On the university website?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So I would advise you to follow the lecture notes which I have uploaded, which the university has uploaded on the website. No, because there you will find the issues, the topics important for 8 marks, 4 marks and 2 marks. Particularly the questions for objective type, the questions of objective type, the 2 marks. And I would advise you to solve those questions. Have you solved those questions? Have you found
Yes, sir.
answers to those questions? How many of you have found answers to those questions? The questions I gave in my lecture notes. How many of you? Did anybody
Yes, sir.
attempt to answer them? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Did you attempt to answer the questions?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Oh, we solved it, but didn't start.
Did you try? Tell me, tell me. Time is running out. No. We have to end this session. So, anyway, I would advise you to follow the study materials and to follow particularly the sample answers provided to the important issues, the discussions. But apart from that, I would also advise you to follow the standard references, the select reading list provided at the end of the lecture notes. And I would once again repeat 3 very important books. I mentioned them in the classroom. I remember that in my last class, I mentioned those books. The first one is by John Grover Smith. John Grover Smith, T.S. Eliot, no, Poetry and Plays. T.S. Eliot's Poetry and Plays. This is the most authoritative, book on Eliot's poetry and drama. Oh, you would also find an excellent chapter on Murder in the Cathedral. Do you have Murder in the Cathedral in the second semester? Do you have that?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So try to find out. Try to find out that book, John Grover Smith. Did you borrow it from the library? Any one of you? Did you borrow that book? Were you able to borrow the book before the lockdown?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So share it, if possible, share it with others. John Grover Smith. I don't know whether the ebook is available. I'm not sure. No, try to find out if any internet version, online version is available of that book, John Grover Smith. Okay. John Grover Smith. And the second one I mentioned, it is by B.C. Southam, S-O-U-T-H-A-M. That reference is given there in my lecture notes. You will find it in my lecture notes. Okay, B.C. Southam, A Student's Guide. A Student's Guide to the Selected Poems of T.S. Eliot. And the third one I referred is by George Williamson. George Williamson, A Reader's Guide to the Poems of T.S. Eliot. A Reader's Guide to the Poems of T.S. Eliot. You will find that book. You will find that book in my reading list. In my reading list. So you may have a number of questions. I know that. With regard to the second prelude, you may have a number of questions, but as you know that we have to call it a day today, as we have exhausted our time. It's time to say goodbye for today. Anyway, but we will definitely meet again next week, that is next Wednesday. The date will be, I think it's 22nd, yes. We meet again on 22nd of April, okay, at 3:30 p.m. And on that day, I will definitely listen to your questions. I will take questions on the second prelude. And on that day, I will also discuss the third and fourth preludes. Okay, next Wednesday, I shall once again discuss the third and fourth preludes. So, I would like to end this lecture, but before that, I would ask all of you to on your video screen, to make yourselves visible, all of you. Make yourselves visible. I would like to see you, yes.
Your full page is not visible.
No, as many as possible, as many as possible. Now, will you take a few screenshots of this interaction? Who can take the screenshot? Yes, you take a few screenshots of this interaction. Okay, and post some of them, maybe 4 or 5 of them on the WhatsApp group. Okay, Sangjukta, will you be doing that?
Yes, sir.
Ankita, yes. Arup is there, Priyangbada, yes. Bapi is there, Lakshmi Narayan is there, Shagorika, Tania, Akhtar, yes. Kajol, Aparajita, yes. Ankana, yes, so many of them. Subhash, yes. Subhash, you have sported a beautiful mustache. You know, it's very impressive. You know, it's almost like Gabbar Singh, you know, very interesting. Yes. So take a screenshot. Have you taken screenshots? Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Fine, yes. Some of
Yes,
you are
sir.
away from
Yes,
your
sir.
home. I think it's a poor connectivity. You know, that has forced you to come out of
Yes,
your
sir.
house.
Ekdom.
I understand, yes. But be careful, you know, maintain social distancing. Be careful of your surroundings. These are very bad times. You need to be careful. Okay. So are you okay, all
Yes,
of you?
sir.
No problem?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
No health
sir.
issues?
No
Sir.
problem.
Fit
Yes,
and
sir, yes.
fine? Okay.
Yes,
So
Ekdom.
take care. Stay indoors. We will meet again next week on 22nd. Yes.
Okay, sir.
Have you taken the
Okay, sir.
screenshots once again? Have you taken,
Yes,
Momota?
sir.
Have you taken the screenshot?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,